The assembly lines in the auto sector will shut down within 10 days, I predict.
Windsor is home to major auto plants and related parts makers. More than 100,000 jobs are at risk.
Windsor could be in trouble. All right, so this is a list of all the municipalities in Canada that would be most affected by tariffs from the U.S. As you can see, at number 3, at 61% exposure, it's Windsor, Ontario. Now listen, it's easy to let your mind run amok with thoughts of destruction of Windsor, the sky is falling, it's over, and we will get to those scenarios on the way, but experts are going over many different things that could happen depending on how long this lasts, how our government responds, and whether this even happens in the first place because we're on pause again from the tariffs. One thing that could happen is actually inflation of property values even further, which no is not a good thing. We'll talk about all that on the way. My name is Ryan. You know me by now. I'm a real estate agent in the Windsor area. I've been working here for like 10 years, and I help people move to this area. If you are interested and you need some more info, that is my phone number right there on the screen. Feel free to reach out. Let's go. Scenario number 1, the tariffs come, but just for a few months. There are several political commentators and economists that are suggesting that Trump is just trying to force us to renegotiate the trade agreement because it's a bad deal for the United States, he says. Trump wants a different deal, and he's negotiated this way before in real estate developing back in the day. He might be doing it now. If that's true, here's how it could play out. And bear in mind, a lot of this is a guess. Jobs in Windsor would go on pause, and the government, as they've already said, would have COVID-style bailouts ready for us. There would be a check in the mail almost immediately. Once it gets to a point where they negotiate a new trade agreement, people would be back to work, but probably not everyone. I think most jobs would come back, but if we have a new trade agreement, that would likely mean that it's less favorable to be working in Windsor and shipping products to the States, which might mean we lose some of the jobs. I imagine Windsor and a lot of Canada's GDP would decrease, and we would enter a bit of a recession. Recessions happen. They're common, and you usually recover within a few years. In fact, do you remember the Great Recession, the big one, 2008?
We are in the midst of a serious financial crisis, and the federal government is responding with decisive action.
Check this out. This shows the average price of a house in Windsor going back to like the 60s. 2008, the recession starts. 2010, you can see we've recovered completely, at least in terms of housing prices. What this does provide is an opportunity to purchase a home at a dampened price than the peak of the market. So that is something that could happen. Of course, you have to be blessed enough to have the cash to do that at the time, but some people do get rich in recessions, especially considering what happens next. Justin Trudeau, Pierre Poilievre, Doug Ford, all the politicians went on TV this week and they all said, listen, we will have COVID-style bailouts for you, which is essentially printing money. This is highly inflationary. If this does happen, you remember COVID, 2020, they start handing out the cash, and by 2022, the prices peaked at an all-time high in Canadian history, okay? Something like that could happen again if the spending is as great as it was during COVID, which was like $300 billion they spent. Although that's not like the destruction of Windsor scenario, I still don't think it's a great scenario because for Canada, I don't want housing prices to skyrocket again or your kids are never going to be able to afford a house. You know what I'm saying? But again, that does depend on how long these tariffs last. If it's a couple weeks, I don't even think we're in this realm. Scenario number 2. Listen, the doom and gloom is on the way. The nightmare wildest fantasies we will get to. But first, scenario 2, maybe nothing happens.
I don't think America wants a trade war with either one of their either one of their border neighbors. I just really don't. I think he was trying to get some other stuff, and he threw a grenade in the middle of it. He's a New York street fighter, and that's how he negotiates.
But I mean, he is threatening tariffs for a reason. There's a goal in mind. Perhaps the goal is really just to clean up the border. and stop all the fentanyl and all that stuff. And if that's true, that's probably best case scenario. It makes our government actually be responsible and do the right thing, and the tariffs don't happen and no one loses their job. It just makes us sweat for a couple months, you know what I'm saying? Or, like I said before, he is trying to renegotiate the trade agreement, and this is really above my pay grade, but I imagine our GDP would drop after the renegotiation, and there would be that slight recession still happening. That's scenario 2. Are you ready for the doom and gloom? Scenario number 3. In this scenario, old Trumpy boy is serious and he wants all those jobs back in the United States permanently.
But we're going to have a country that makes product again. We're going to have a country that Apple and these other great companies are going to make their product in our country.
So the tariffs come on eventually permanently. This is how my crazy imagination can see this playing out in the worst case scenario. You ready? We know that Chrysler employs like 4,000 people in Windsor, and the battery plant was supposed to employ like 3,000 people. The Ford engine plant, I don't even know how many they employ. And then there's estimated like 30,000 jobs in Windsor that are somehow tied to the steel or automotive industry that ship products to the States. In this scenario, tariffs permanently, all unemployed. Economists are predicting that car plants would shut down within a week if this were to really happen. Trudeau came on TV last week and said this.
What he wants is to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy, because that'll make it easier to annex us.
Trudeau is telling us that the US wants to essentially absorb and economically invade Canada. He, in this nightmare fantasy, would use this to enact some emergency powers to stay in power indefinitely. During that time, his government would print tons and tons and tons of money to uphold the Canadian economy and become the be-all and end-all government that supplies the quote-unquote utopia for its citizens. And all the while, the dollar would become worth less and less and less and less until we're like Zimbabwe in 2008, where hyperinflation happened and there were homeless trillionaires, because everyone's a trillionaire, because the money buys nothing. They literally had like billion-dollar bills they were printing in Zimbabwe at the time. At this point, the great country of Canada would be in great peril. There would be uprisings, there would be rebellions, there would be chaos everywhere, and the U.S. Army would come in to restore peace and democracy like they did in the Middle East, and thus Canada folds and becomes the 51st state, all before the end of Trump's 4-year term. Am I crazy? Yes. Probably. Okay, I don't actually think that's going to happen. That's just waxing poetic. To be honest, one of the first 2 scenarios are likely going to happen. I hope it's no tariffs at all, as does everyone else in Windsor and in Canada working a job that ships things to the States. If you want more information about moving to Windsor and what Windsor's actually like and how much housing costs, the rest of my channel is about that. It's about real Windsor stuff, not fantasy, weird nightmare crap, okay? If you are looking to move here and you want some more information on what it's like living here, that's my phone number on the screen. Feel free to reach out. See you next time.